And of course, you've expanded beyond the UK now, and EU, and you're doing a lot of trading in Africa. Because, to be honest, most of the times I speak to you, you're either in Ghana or Nigeria, or so I know you're doing business out there. What's it like doing business on the African continent versus doing business here in the EU?
I think doing business in African continent is actually very inspirational for people like me because
Mm.
you see, a lot of the news that you would normally see in the likes of the western part of the world is always when there's some disaster in Africa. But
Yeah,
when you get there, right, you really see real serious players. I mean, I say to people, you see a husband and wife owning a hotel about the size of a Marriott or a Hilton hotel, and they're not the only ones. I mean,
yeah,
sometimes it's even more decked out than the Hilton in London. It's
absolutely.
got 100 and something rooms and so forth. And it's not just one person like that. He's not the star boy. There's always somebody that has a hotel like him or bigger than him. And
Yeah,
it's always the black people. I mean, I don't see any other than black people owning pharmacists, pharmaceutical companies, massive rum companies, you name it,
yeah,
it's all owned by black people. I've met guys with trucking transportation companies, like one of my business associates in Ghana, and he's got like 200 trucks. I mean, big, massive oil trucks rolling around the place, it's not a guy from Europe.
mm,
Um, so to me, it definitely gives me full inspiration and the capacity and how these guys think. I mean, especially like some of my Nigerian business associates. I mean, there's a few of them. They just have their own private jet because they think that to travel first class is for losers. You know what I mean to say? But that's the way these guys are thinking.
yeah,
I'm not traveling first class. I want to have my own plane. You know
yeah,
what I'm saying?
yeah,
You grow up in the UK. Sometimes, from the time a guy, does some work and he manages to get, I don't know, a BMW with some mag wheels, he thinks he's made it in life. And then you meet these African guys who's like, I mean, that's the car I buy for my son or something like that, because I'm not driving no BMW, I need a Bentley, and then he has a
yeah,
Bentley. He doesn't want to travel for us, like he wants to get his own private jet, you know.
exactly.
So the capacity that these the guys
Okay,
take on Africa, I don't know, because it's a big continent with 1.4 billion people. And I
absolutely.
mean, sometimes, just like many years ago, as a little story I could remember, when I first went to Nigeria, I like to tell this story actually. I met a young guy who was a farmer selling sorrel. And I wanted to buy like about 5 to 6. I could have pushed it to 10 tons. I couldn't even afford any of that time. It was almost 15 years ago. And he only wanted to sell me a container,
Yeah,
which had about 15 tons. I mean, it was a good price. It was like $1.50, and I was paying about £2 a kilo for it at that time. And he couldn't understand me from England with my, proper, well dressed, and him sitting on with a short pants and a rubber slipper, right? And I didn't want to buy this container from him. So the first question that hit me is that he didn't ask me where I came from, where I was originally from, and I said I'm from Guyana. And he didn't know where Guyana was, right? So I explained to him where Guyana was, and he's like, okay, he was happy with that. Then he said, how many people live in your country? And I said, it's about a million, which I even exaggerated. Guyana only has about 800,000 people. And he said, a million people in your whole country? He said, my village has got 8 million. You know? And I'm like, you sit down in the UK or you see these movies and you think average village in the likes of Nigeria is probably 2,000 people. The guy's
yeah.
village has got 8 million people.
I hear you.
So then he began to cry how poor he is, that how he only manages to sell one container every month. Now that one container is £15,000 or more. I'm talking about 15 years ago. And he thinks he's not doing very well in life. I mean, there's people in the city in London who will be happy to earn 100 grand. And he's making 15 grand a month, right? With his
Yeah,
rubber slip and a short pants. And then he says to me that he is now measuring himself up. He said, the top guy in my village, he ships out over 40 containers into the Middle East every month. So he is measuring himself up to the top guy in his village. And I'm thinking, well, if the top guy in his village is doing 40 containers a month, could you imagine the top guy in Nigeria? What is going on?
yeah,
So,
yeah.
being in those environments, it just shows your level of thinking into a
Yeah,
total different sphere of
yeah,
capacity. And that's why I love to be around Africa, because that's the
Yeah.
kind of stuff that sees me and inspires me. Definitely as a black person.
Mm,
I absolutely concur with that because I've had a similar experience.
mm,
You know, in the Caribbean, we have this daft conversation about small island and big island.
mm,
Yes.
And I remember I was having a conversation with someone, again Nigerian, and they were asking, you know, so Colin, how big is Jamaica? Because you know they hear about Jamaica and everything, and he said, how many people are in Jamaica? And I, you know, at the time I proudly said, you know, 2.4 million people, and he looked at me puzzled and he said, only that?
Exactly, exactly.
Because
I think
he
Jamaica
said
has
a
done a
similar
very good
thing.
job at a PR of themselves, you know.
I'm
Definitely.
telling
I mean,
you,
everyone in the world knows Jamaica. I mean, if there's
I'm telling you,
even when I'm moving around Africa, they
yeah.
definitely don't know Guyana. Then they don't even know the word Caribbean. Then I say it's near Jamaica. Like, Bob Marley. I always say they probably need to put Bob Marley on the money in Jamaica, because I mean he's the person who's probably taking Jamaica to the other heights, you know.
It's true. It's true. It's true.
oh dear.
So,
But
so
that's sorry,
sorry.
that's the beauty of exposure.
Absolutely.
You know, really just
Yes.
exposure and expanding our
Yeah.
minds, our horizons, you know, and some what we can aspire to.
I honestly believe that every black person needs
Mm,
to spend time in Africa.
Oh yes.
Because
mm,
if we were to go on the continent, and it doesn't matter where, Nigeria, Ghana, um, Rwanda, if we go and spend time on the continent, our perspective is shifted because
mm,
we see normalized black success.
mm,
When
Yes.
you look at these countries, everybody looks like us
mm,
and they're doing
Yes.
really well.
mm,
Oh yes. And I mean the other thing about it is that even like in regards to, you know, you will see big construction. I mean, like in Ghana, big road motorways, like you
Mm,
know, like the spaghetti junction almost and it's all black engineers. You know, everybody
absolutely.
there. You know, most of the time, you know, that's all you ever see. You know, everything. You know, like one of the things I actually marvel about is like in Ghana, there's a lot of Land Cruisers. You know, and Land Cruisers are about 100,000 US dollars, right? And it's
Yeah.
thousands and thousands of them. And then you'll see a
That's
second-hand car dealer, and he's got about 30, 40 spanking new Land Cruisers on his forecourt,
on his
you know,
forecourt. Yeah.
and he's not even a main dealer. He's a second-hand trader. You know, he just went and bought his own 40, 50 Land Cruisers at 100 to
Mm.
150,000 US dollars, and he's selling it.
Yeah.
You know, I don't
Yeah.
think I've ever seen a second-hand dealer with 40 Land Cruisers in the UK on a
In the UK.
forecourt.
mm.
Yeah.
You'll be lucky to see two or three, you know, and that's
Yeah.
second hand, not spanking new. And thank you to Pitch Black for doing what they're doing. I mean, the word has to go out there, and there's always the need of, you know, a top line for our own that could do what you're doing.